Okay, so for the first time ever, I'm going to try making sourdough without a recipe. I've only made sourdough 3 times. I used Tasty's method, I've used Joshua Weissman's method, but I kind of get the gist of it just from researching that there's like a typical hydration level, and you definitely need to have at least a little bit of wheat flour in there for the sourdough starter to actually work. But I'm kind of want to experiment with how much more wheat flour I can put in there, because one of the times I made sourdough, it had a lot of wheat in it, and I thought it was softer and it tasted better than the times I made it with less wheat. So the first thing I'm going to do is feed my sourdough starter, Dave. He's been in the fridge for about a week, so he's very hungry, which will be good. Right now it's about 10 p.m. and I'll probably get started on this at like 8 a.m. so that's, a good 10 hours. I know optimally you want to kind of feed it between 6 to 8 hours. Dave kind of is a slow eater. He takes a little bit, so I figured 10 hours is kind of better for him. So I already have the flour measured out. This is 50 grams bread flour, 50 grams wheat flour. So now I'm going to add 25 grams of my mature starter, and then the rest will be discard, and I'll probably put that in the fridge and use it in crackers or banana bread or something later. So I'm just going to go ahead and put 25 grams in there. Okay, so I've measured out 25 grams of starter. Typically, you probably want to actually dissolve the starter in water first and then add the flour, but I like measuring up my flour first for some reason. I don't know. It works fine. You just have to stir it extra well. So I have 100 grams of water. This is 100% hydration starter. That just means that there's equal amounts of flour and water. So there's 100 grams of flour. I'm adding 100 grams of water, 100% hydration. And then I'm just going to give that a good stir. Okay, so I'm done mixing. So now I'm just going to pop the little top. Because it's fermenting, you don't want to close the top, otherwise it might build up pressure and explode. So you just want to loosely cover it. So that's Dave. I'm going to put this Dave in the fridge. Good morning, everyone. As you can see, Dave has grown quite a bit since last night. The tape is where he started. So it's been about 10 hours. It's 8:30 in the morning right now, and as you can see, it's kind of slightly falling, so it's a perfect time to start our levain. So right now I have 80 grams of room temperature water. Into that, I'm going to add 40 grams of starter, 40 grams of wheat flour, and 40 grams of bread flour. And then I'm going to stir that up really nice and put it in an oven with the light turned on. Don't turn the oven on, and turn the light on the oven on so that it's like 78 degrees in there. Alright, so I got my leaven all mixed up. Once again, putting the top back on loosely. This guy's going to chill out for about 5 to 6 hours in this oven that has the light turned on. About 3.5 hours in, I'm going to start the main dough, the main flour and water mixture. That's called the Autolyse. So I guess I will see you guys again in 3.5 hours. And if you're wondering what's going to happen to Dave, I'm going to let him chill out for a couple hours, probably feed him around 3 or 4 p.m. And then I'll probably put him in the fridge until I need to use him again, or until it's time to feed him again. So it's been about, I want to say like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. So that's where we're at. It's starting to grow a little bit. What I've noticed is that it kind of starts off slow, and then towards like the last hour, it really gets pretty active. So I'll check in again right after I finish the Autolyse. Okay, so it's been 3.5 hours, so it's time to start the Autolyse. I think with this one, I'm not using a recipe, as I said before. And I like a higher content of wheat flour because I think it makes the bread softer and taste better. So I think I'm going to do 800 grams flour total. I'm going to do 500 grams bread flour and then 300 grams wheat flour. And I think I'm going to do like, because I think wheat flour takes more water to like keep it hydrated. So I'm going to do like a higher hydration. So I'm going to do around 84% hydration, so that's gonna be like 675 grams of water. So I have the flour all measured out, 800 grams, 799, whatever. I'm just gonna give this like a quick little stir with my hands. Gotta use your hands always in sourdough, so I'm just gonna, make sure that it's kind of like mixed together. And then next I'm gonna measure out the water. And for the Autolyse, it's pretty important that the water is like 90 degrees Fahrenheit, in that kind of range, like a little hotter than room temp. So I have the water all measured out. It's 575 grams, as I said. This is gonna have 675 grams of water total. I'm just gonna add the other 100 grams later on in the process. So using it's not a proper thermometer, and it's kind of running out of battery, so you can't really see it well. I don't even know if this will pick up, but this candy thermometer is saying that the water is 86 degrees right now, so I'm gonna microwave it in like 5-second intervals just to get it up to 90. If it's like 89, that's fine. I just want it to be a little bit warmer. Okay, so I have the water up to temp, and now is my least favorite part, which is mixing the flour and the water together. With most spreads, and especially with sourdough, you have to use your hands. I mean, I prefer to use my hands to like a spoon. With sourdough, you don't use a stand mixer. I don't have a stand mixer anyway with a dough hook, so when I make bread anyway, I usually just use my hands, but with sourdough, you just use your hands always. So the key to this is you want to mix it until it's literally all the flour is just hydrated, and that's it. You don't want to develop any gluten further. The gluten is kind of developed later on in the process. Sourdough isn't traditionally needed like yeasted breads, so there's weird methods of developing the gluten, but that happens later on, mostly during the bulk fermentation. So yeah, I just gotta get in there, make sure everything's hydrated. Okay, so everything is well combined now. I kind of wiped down the sides, but mostly just the flour is hydrated. So now I'm gonna cover it with a damp towel. I like using damp towel. You can also use plastic wrap, but gotta be environmentally friendly. And also plastic wrap is really annoying to work with, and I just prefer a damp towel in general. And then after I do that, it's going to go in the oven where the Leaven is, and you can see that's, the last hour and a half, he's really just gonna shoot up there. But yeah, so they need to rest at the same temperature. And actually, it's kind of interesting. This looks really shaggy right now, but after it rests for like an hour and a half, it's gonna look completely different. It's kind of crazy. But anyway, yeah, so I'll see you guys in another hour and a half for the next step in the process. It's actually been about like 2.5 hours. I didn't think the Leaven was ready after 5 hours, so I let it sit for an extra hour. This is what it looks like on top. So yeah, this is what the Autolyse looks like. It's still a little bit shaggy, still a little bit ragged, but now what I'm gonna do is, so I have 50 grams of 90-degree water. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pour the Leaven on top of the Autolyse and spread it out. I'm gonna dimple it in a little bit, and then I'm gonna pour the water on, and then I'm gonna incorporate it, which is very messy, you'll see. So I have the Leaven spread out over the Autolyse, dimpled in a little bit. I'm gonna pour this water over. And now it's messy, but it's kind of fun. Really get your hands in, you just start mixing it up. And then once this is kind of mixed in, I'm gonna do something called I think it's called the rhubarb method. I don't know. Once the water is mostly absorbed, I'll show you what that is. So the water is mostly absorbed, as you can see. Don't be afraid to get your hands in there. And I'm gonna try to show this. I don't have a tripod, so I'm gonna only be doing this with one hand. It's called the rhubarb method, I think. You kind of like slap it against the side of the bowl and let it fall back down, so it's like, it's a good arm workout, that's for sure. And this method just really helps everything get all incorporated. We'll do this again when I put the salt in. The point about that is that you don't want to put the salt and the Leaven in at the same time. That's why you incorporate them separately. I don't exactly know why, but I know that it ruins the texture and can ruin the fermentation. So I'll just keep doing that, and once it's a lot less sticky, we'll do some slap and folds. Okay, so everything is incorporated, so I have dumped everything out onto my unfloured work surface. This part gets really messy. I'm going to try to show you. It's called slap and folds. Basically, it helps build tension in the dough, makes it less sticky. This is basically kind of like kneading, but for sourdough. So I'm going to try to show you. So I just did slap and folds for about 3 to 5 minutes. So I'm now just gonna cover this back up with a damp towel and let it rest for 30 minutes in the same warm environment. So for me, that's gonna be the oven with the light turned on. We're gonna add the rest of the water, and we're gonna add the salt as well, and repeat basically the same process we just did for incorporation. So it's been 30 minutes. You can see that the texture of the dough has completely changed. It's like smooth on top. So now I have 20 grams of salt. I'm gonna spread that out all over. And then I have the last 50 grams of water to equal 675 total. And I'm just gonna repeat the same process I did with the Leaven. Mix that in, incorporate it. Then I'm gonna do more slap and folds. And then after that, we'll meet back up and I'll tell you all about the bulk ferment and the stretch and fold. So completed that process, salt is incorporated, and now I'm going to start what is called the bulk ferment. So for this one, I think I'm gonna do 4.5 hours. But during the first part of the bulk ferment, you do something called stretch and folds, and I'll show you that a little bit later. So basically, these are gonna be spaced out in like small intervals. So I'm gonna let this rest for 15 minutes, do the first set of stretch and folds. Let that rest for 15 minutes, do the second set of stretch and folds. Let that rest for 15 minutes, do the third set of stretch and folds. Let that rest for 30 minutes, do the fourth set of stretch and folds, 30 more minutes, fifth set of stretch and folds, and then the sixth set of stretch and folds, and then just let it rest for the remainder of the bulk ferment. That doesn't make sense. You'll see, I can also write out a timeline in the description, but basically this is going to be resting for a very, very long time. This is when it will develop its flavor and get some rise. And yeah, so I'm going to cover it with the damp towel and put it back into that warm environment once again. Okay, so it's been 15 minutes, so it's time to do our first round of stretch and folds. And honestly, for the next 5, I'm probably just going to speed through it because it's really repetitive. So anyway, you just take part and you stretch it as far as you can. You don't want it to rip, and then you bring it over to the other side and you do that all the way around. All right, now I'm just gonna cover it back up, the damp towel, put it right back in that warm spot, and come back and do another set of these in 15 minutes. So I just finished the last of the 6 stretch and folds, and there's about 2 hours left in the bulk ferment. So I'm just gonna let it sit and rest, ferment, do its thing for that amount of time. And then after the 2 hours is up, we're going to do the pre-shaping and then the final shape. So it's almost done. This process is a lot of waiting, a lot of doing small tasks that don't take very long, but you still gotta pay attention. So yeah, it's almost, well, I say almost, it will be, you know, it won't be baked till tomorrow, but it's almost done. Yay, finally the bulk ferment is done. That was very long. So as you can see, it's kind of risen a little bit. It's a little hard to tell. There's some bubbling, that's good. So now I have to like gently get this out of the bowl. I won't be able to record this because it requires 2 hands and a delicate touch. So it's out of the bowl, and now I'm gonna eyeball it and cut it into 2. You could weigh it, honestly it would just be kind of a pain. It doesn't really matter that they're like exactly the same size. So anyway, I'm gonna cut it with this. Usually you would use a bench scraper. I don't have one of those, so this is a wet knife. I'm just gonna eyeball it and then kind of pull one away from the others. Alright, and now that they're separated, I have this wet hand. I'm gonna kind of roll it onto itself into a ball. And then this is the pre-shape. So you kind of want to get it a little taut, not too taut, you don't want it ripping. So basically you kind of like roll it like this. You roll it to this kind of to the side and then roll it under. So I'm going to do this to both of them and then show you what they look like after. Okay, so I'm done with the pre-shape and this is what they look like. Now I'm going to let them rest uncovered for like 15-20 minutes. Don't want them spreading out too much, but I want to let them relax a little bit so that they're in good shape for the final shaping. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to prepare their final resting places, so I'll show you that. Okay, so what I have here are 2 clean dish towels, and I'm going to heavily flour them with some all-purpose flour, and then I'm going to put them into this bowl and then this loaf pan. Traditionally, with sourdough, you use bannetons, which are like these special baskets for sourdough, and you would just flour those heavily and put the sourdough in, but you don't need those. That's not like one of those specific tools that you really need to have. So I just make sure that I like completely saturate this with flour, because while it's fermenting in the fridge for 14 to 18 hours, it really soaks up all this flour, and the last thing you want is for you to be dumping out the sourdough before it's baking it to stick to the dish towel, because it will ruin the shape, and it's just kind of stressful and annoying for that to happen. So I'm going to make sure to heavily flour the tops of the spools as well. So yeah, I'm going to do this, put them in their bowls, and then show you guys the final shaping. Alright, so the bowls have been resting. They're still a little taut, but they spread out a little bit, relax a little bit. So what I'm going to do, heavily flour the top. Heavily. And then I'm going to pick it up and flip it over. Okay, so it's flipped over. What I'm going to do is you fold this up to the middle, and you don't want to flour this side. You want it to stick to itself. And then you fold this side over, and then this side slightly over. And you fold this all the way down. And then you want to fold this onto itself, like pinch it together. This is very hard to show, to demonstrate. Willis holding a camera with one hand. And then you kind of want to like fold this all the way down. And there you go. So now I have my bowl ready. So now I'm going to take the bowl and place it seam side up. Very important, seam side up in this bowl. Have this placed seam side up. I'm just gonna pinch the rest of it together. Make sure that the seam is closed. And then I'm going to place a damp towel over it to make sure that it doesn't dry out. And then I'll do the same. The next one, put it in the loaf pan, and I'll show you these guys before they go into the fridge for their final ferment. Alright, so these are ready to be placed in the fridge. I'm just going to put a damp towel over this one, And I put this one in a large plastic bag. This one's too big to fit. So yeah, so guess I'll see you guys tomorrow when it's time to start preheating the oven. Alright, so it is the next day. It's about 10:15 in the morning. I've had the oven preheating for an hour at 500 degrees with the Dutch oven inside. So the Dutch oven preheats with the oven. And what I'm going to do now is I have my bowls in the fridge. I'm going to take them out one at a time. And it's very important that at this stage I go directly from the fridge, score it, Dutch oven. So you want to go as cold as you can. And because I only have one Dutch oven, I have to do it one at a time. And in between baking, I will bring the oven back up to 500 degrees for about 30 minutes. So there are some kind of semi-special tools you're going to need for the scoring process. I like to use some parchment paper, so I can just like kind of quickly put in the Dutch oven. It makes it easier than just dropping the loaf in by itself. To do that, I like to use a plate. And then for the scoring, you need some all-purpose flour to rub on top, and then you need, so a lame is basically just a razor blade on a stick, so a razor blade works fine. If you have knives that are sharp enough, then you can use those as well. My knives are not sharp enough. So yeah, I'm gonna get the first bowl out of the fridge, and we're gonna score it and then quickly put it into the Dutch oven. Alright, so this is what this bowl looks like. The next day you can see it's kind of expanded to take the shape of the container, just like liquid. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take all-purpose flour and dust it all over this side, and then put the parchment paper like this and flip it out. But I can't do that with one hand, so I'll see you when I've done that. Okay, so I flipped it. Just gonna remove the container. Pray that I floured the towel well enough. Maybe I didn't. Okay, we're good. So I'm gonna heavily flour the top of the surface. This is just so you have like a nice variation of color when it bakes. And I'm gonna just do a very simple score for this one. The shape of it doesn't really allow for a lot of creativity. So you want to go fast and quick, and I just did like a simple one. I want to make sure it's deep enough. You can see nice bubbles on the inside, so I'm going to put this in the Dutch oven and bake it. So these are going to be baked for 20 minutes at 500 degrees with the lid of the Dutch oven on, and then after 20 minutes I'm going to remove the lid, decrease the oven temperature to 450 and bake for an additional 25 to 30 minutes. And in between the baking of the two bowls, I'm going to increase the temperature back up to 500, let the oven sit like that with the Dutch oven inside for another 30 minutes, and then do the second one. If I had two Dutch ovens, I could do this at the same time, but I don't think my oven is big enough for them anyway. Here are the final loaves. I think they came out beautifully, especially this one. This one's really pretty. But now comes the hardest part, which is waiting, because these guys have to cool down completely, which can take anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. And then we can cut into them and see what the crumb looks like, which is really like the true test of if my experimental, no recipe, percentage based only sourdough is actually going to come out. So it smells incredible in here. I want to devour these, but I gotta wait. 2 agonizing hours later, and these loaves are both completely cooled. This one's a little bit warm, so I'm going to cut into this one. So it looks pretty good. The big bubbles aren't necessarily ideal, kind of makes it hard for the butter. Should taste pretty good. It has all the nice small bubbles that you would want, so that means the Leaven worked. Doesn't look like Play-Doh on the inside. For some reason, when I do like the simpler methods, like the tasty method, where you just do the starter straight in with the Autolyse and you don't do all the slap and folds, that one turned out the best I've ever done. So maybe I'll have to go back to that method, or maybe we'll have to see. Maybe it's something with the amount of flour I have. So I hope you guys enjoyed that long process. It is, about 36-40 hours to make sourdough from start to finish. It's an agonizing process, definitely takes a lot of patience, but it tastes so good. Like, it is honestly the best bread that you can make, and it feels so rewarding too because it's a long process again, but it's also something that you make completely from scratch, including the starter and everything. I mean, that's like a labor of love. So I hope you guys enjoyed. These beauties are probably going to be given to friends because I have a ton of bread already. I make bread all the time. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you guys next time.